Hey everybody, welcome to the Rabbit Trail Podcast. This is the podcast where we waste your time in 4 minutes. Just kidding. But we actually, we chase the truth wherever it runs. And this is episode number 167.
167.
Did you say it right?
I did.
Oh my
You
gosh.
said and I.
No, I didn't.
Oh,
I got you. All right, so we're moving on from there as quickly as possible.
Cut,
because
start over.
No, we
kidding,
can't
I'm kidding,
because we've got education. We've got an educator in the room. We have to get our numbers right, Brent.
I know.
So, all right, come on now. So anyway, we're glad you're joining with us.
He likes to add an "and" in the middle. And you're not supposed to say it.
I know. I suppose that's the decimal point. Right?
I thought I heard an "and," but I wasn't paying attention.
Anyway, so we're glad you're joining with us. And like I said, 4 minutes of absolute zaniness, and then we'll get into the information. But we've got a guest speaker, or a guest with us, not guest speaker. We're just let her talk the whole time. We got a guest with us today, and we're going to welcome Dr. Araiza here in a second. But yay. And but anyway, I'm Greg Harris. I'm the senior pastor at All Branch, and this is the podcast where we basically pick up typically from our sermon and move forward. But this week we're going to do something a little different. And my fellow rabbit chasers, why don't you guys say hi?
Hello, my name is Stephen Oldham. I'm the local outreach pastor here at Olive Branch. Thank you for watching. If you're watching on YouTube, make sure you like and subscribe. But also, if you're watching on Spotify, make sure you subscribe there and give us a question or a review. And share it with your friends.
Boom, man. My name is Brent Branchard. I'm the Connections pastor here at Olive Branch Church. And just want to remind you, we would love to get your feedback of the podcast. We would love for you to send in your questions, whether it be a life situation question, whether it be a theological question. And you just email that to rabbittrail@obcc.church, rabbittrail@obcc.church. And we would love to spend time discussing those questions and implications of life and theology.
Are you making up words again?
Yeah, I thought a new word was going to come out of that.
So I want to welcome you, Dr. Araiza. Do you want to call Jen Dr. Araiza? How do you want to do this?
Either one's fine.
So awesome. Why don't you introduce yourself to everybody and just what you do and how you got here?
Awesome. Dr. Araiza, I'm the head of school at Olive Branch, and I just recently started here. I think I'm about 6 months in, and it's been such a pleasure just to come alongside each of you and be able to lead the school.
Yeah, it's been pretty cool to have you. You've been doing some amazing things, just adjusting and shifting the culture. We're going to have some good conversation about that. And not the culture shift, but about like education and some cool stuff like that. But before we do that, Brent, what do we got on tap for normal for you? Like, do you have a joke, or are you tapped out on jokes? Like,
I don't know if it's a joke, but you know,
I don't know if they're jokes either.
Yeah, we can't tell sometimes.
Yeah, sometimes you
just can't tell at all.
You know, and not all jokes are funny. So just saying that, sometimes they just point out the irony of life.
And sometimes they hurt, Brent.
Yes, they do. But no, you know, like pickleball is all the rage, and you know, Nancy's retiring this year and everything else, and so we were looking into like things that she could do. Have you ever heard of quiet tennis?
Do I want to know what it is?
You play it the same way as regular tennis, but there's no racket.
Oh, that's a word play. Things that make you go,
yeah.
All right. Well, thanks for that. Any strange comments out there on the internet for us, Stephen, at all, or are we good?
Just the lengthy ones, and so you want to save those for a later time.
We'll
can.
Need to save those, but otherwise positive, huh?
Yeah. Well, no.
Nope.
I mean, there's yes and no. There is some timing on this in the transcripts of my thoughts as of late, and so I guess some people are responding to overcoming shame with some positive reviews there, so that's good. But the other one is a very lengthy question, and I'd like to give it some time since it's well crafted. So, and I love those.
I had a friend who texted me the other day, and he literally said, like, I'm bored out of my mind just reading through the Rabbit Trail comment section. And he's like, man, that's some fun stuff there.
There's some interesting stuff there.
Let me ask you this: like when I watch it on YouTube, I usually watch it on my TV. I will say I rarely do watch it because, you know, I don't want to.
You just watch your parts, yeah.
You know,
I think
it's
just
forward
you
to
like
you guys,
yeah.
and then just watch me, and because that way I can condense it to just like 2.5 minutes.
That was funny.
But again, like comments and stuff don't pop up on that.
They can
if
if you
you're
want.
looking on just a regular computer and watching it on YouTube, do you see the comments
If
that
you turn them
everybody
on,
makes? Or
you can see them on your TV if you know how to hit that button.
oh, okay.
So there's a feature that you can turn on the chat if it's there, but I don't
That's
know if
usually live.
we don't know. Well, you can enable it. You can look through it still. It's up. You just hit the button and it pulls it over, and you can scroll through that way. It just depends on if we've operated it on. I'd be interesting to see if, because I can do it on mine, and it'll do comments and live. You don't do live though.
Like I always see like this comments bubble and I'll say 7 comments or whatever.
Yeah.
And then when I click it, it opens up for me to make a comment. It doesn't show me comments.
There's a little description on the bottom of the YouTube. You click that, it'll bring it up onto the right side. So that's kind of fun.
Everybody else can interact.
Everyone
as
else
well.
can read through all the weird things that we read through if you want to know.
So again, today we're going to just kind of bypass the sermon part. We've been talking about this numerous times over the last few podcasts. So we didn't feel like we had a whole lot to chew on with that. So we're going to kind of just turn it over and ask Jennifer, Dr. Araiza, which do you prefer?
Either one's fine.
Okay.
Whatever's easier.
All right. So like when when you're like in an airplane and something goes wrong and they go, "Is there a doctor in here?" Do you ever just say, "I am a doctor, but they're probably going to die"?
Thank the Lord that has not happened yet. But no, I would not raise my hand for
You're
that.
going to
Wrong
educate
kind
them
of
on
doctor.
how they're going to die.
So yeah, we'll just kind of get to learn about the school, get to learn about some of your philosophies of where you want to take the school, and it's been interesting to just see what's been going on over the last year. So it's been exciting.
What's fun is that I wanted to kind of bring this out because as the head of schools, I want you to go last, but I really want you to kind of lay out how you got into education. Why was that a big deal for you? Because all three of us have different kind of realities with education. I grew up in an educator's home. So my father was a principal and ended up being an administrator in a public school. My mom was a librarian and ended up being, after they said only librarians with library degrees, whatever that means.
Library science.
Could only be librarians. She had to switch over to like career center world. And so now I think you have to have a degree in something else for that. But it's like, I kept following things. Sorry. And so yeah, I grew up like in the school district. All my friends' parents were teachers or somebody in the school district. I literally will walk into schools and it's like, I know the smell. Like, the public school smell of Corona Norco Unified School District. Whatever the cleaner that is, it is the same.
You're not talking about the smell of the junior high boys coming in from recess walking down the hall, right?
No, that's at my house.
Yeah.
and that's with my homeschooler. So anyway, but yeah, no. So lots and lots of conversations about education, and my sister is a teacher, or she did her science education as a teacher, and then my mother-in-law was a elementary school teacher, and my father-in-law was a school psychologist in Redlands, and so lots and lots and lots of like teaching world surrounds me. So for me, education is what I like. It's like the water I swim in. And sometimes I'll go talk to educators and it's like, I know this lingo, I got it down, this feels comfortable. And it's actually one of the reasons I didn't enter into education is because I was living in it so much. I probably would have, either if I didn't do ministry, I would have wound up being like a professor or something like that, likely. But that's kind of my world. And I know that for Brent, you're surrounded in education as well in a different fashion.
Yes. My wife is an educator. She started out teaching and went into administration for a charter school that oversees homeschool, and they're pretty large. But she's an educator. She graduated at the top of her class and all this stuff. I barely made it through high school. And I thought the most difficult thing with living with an educator was when I would give her birthday cards or anniversary cards and write a bunch of sweet stuff in there or send her love letters. She would correct it and then send it back to me for correction.
Did you get a grade?
She didn't grade it,
Oh.
but just red marks, arrows, too many commas.
He will get his final grade at his
Nice try.
funeral.
run-on
the report card will be
sentence.
turned in.
There should be "your" with an apostrophe "re," not and it's just like, all right. So I just quit telling her I loved her at that point, and
Horrible.
I'm horrible. So Jen knows my wife.
Yes, I do.
You guys have done education together,
We
and
have.
so just now you've known me for a short time.
Right.
Who do you like better?
This is the question he
Yeah.
asks everybody, by the
Yeah.
way.
I like you both the same.
Oh,
Wow.
you should go into politics.
That says a lot.
Stephen, you've got kind of like varied educational experiences.
I've got all kinds of
well.
weird educational experiences. One of them is my mom's a teacher. She was a teacher in kindergarten and preschool for many years. And then she was a second grade teacher. So I grew up, it was a private school as well. And then for me, I went through the psychology route and I worked at Railway Elementary School for my internship counseling, working with the staff there, evaluating kids who were grief counseling and death and things like that. So it's from a child development sort of view. Those were kind of the first 2 years. I also worked with juvenile delinquents for about a year. They don't call them that anymore. But juvenile offenders that are in the system that wanted to get out and wanted help doing that. So I've worked with a number of the Riverside education people, but from a government kind of side. So
Yeah. And then the last interesting thing is that everybody here has some kind of stake in our church school. I call us whole schoolers. It's kind of my joke because we've done private. My kids were at Olive Branch for a few years, and then we had done homeschool, and it's kind of the ice cream that fills in the gaps. Kind of the homeschooling's always been there, and then now they're in public. So it's been this kind of like journey through all the different forms of schooling. And then I know you've had family go through Olive Branch. And
I think we've had a kid at Olive Branch consecutively for about 15, 16 years
Yeah.
straight, at least. Josiah went through the whole program, and he's in his 22, 23. But all of his siblings have been there. So when he left, his siblings came. So, and there's 3 of them. So.
and then
And then both of my grandkids graduated from Olive Branch School,
Right.
and that was great when Tucker went through, and every Wednesday he would come in my office to say hi. And that was the cool thing. You see him walking down the hall, they stop in your office and chit-chat with you. Every Wednesday Tucker came by to say hi, and he loved me, and then I realized he just wants money for Mission Munchies, because he doesn't come by any other day of the week. But
I'm really hungry. I want Mission Munchies.
But Tucker walked around like he owned the place and just would stop in my office or do whatever he wanted. Faith was very, reserved and just followed the rules and didn't stop by. How come you don't come by my office and say, we're not allowed to? It's like, oh, honey, you can come by my office.
No, we can't.
Yeah, I'll work it out for you.
And so that's kind of our background.
Yeah.
So we'd love to hear more. Like, how did you get into education? Where has that heart started for you?
Oh, absolutely. And so my upbringing a little bit different. So I guess if you would consider it lower middle class, if you will. My dad was an immigrant, so on a green card, life was a little bit different for us. And my mom was a teen mom, and they went their separate ways when we were very, very young. And so from that point, about 7 years old, every year we'd move to a different city and I'd go to a different school. And by definition, we were homeless on many occasions and, sleeping in friends' extra rooms or family members' couches or things like that. So that wasn't abnormal for us, and that was life. And so got really good at learning teachers and what do they want and what are the classroom expectations, because every school, every teacher, every classroom came with new friends, new expectations, new priorities. And so it was really learning the system rather than really appreciating education. And I was hungry to learn. But I was in about 4th grade and still not reading. And I remember one time being homesick and being at my grandma's house. And she said, your dad will be here soon. And I asked what time it was, and she said, read the clock. And I, 4th, 5th grade, somewhere around there, and couldn't read the clock. And she sat down and she taught me how to read a clock, And so there were so many gaps because of the constant moving. But to me, that was life. I didn't know any different, And so education to me, as I started getting older and can own a little bit more of it and learn study skills and learn that there was reasons why we wanted to ask these questions and reasons why we wanted to uncover these different truths and figure out what we believed. It became all-consuming, and by junior high, when I was kind of filling some of those gaps and a little more consistent in my schooling, started doing like the honors courses and things. And in the summer before ninth grade, I had a brain injury. And so it set me back, and I was in bed for about 3 months. And I started ninth grade year in an honors class and still struggling to read. And so having that reality, but wanting so hard and so bad to understand what I was reading. I remember Scarlet Letter was one of them. That was way over my head. And I read and read and read, and I got the Cliff Notes, and I was determined. But
it's way before audiobooks and all that cool stuff. That's
yeah.
out
We
there
had to
now.
go to the library and check out Cliff Notes because I couldn't afford to buy them. So that was reality. That's what life was.
By the way, kids, Cliff Notes is what you use your AI for nowadays.
Yes.
Whoa. Sorry.
times
That's what we
changed.
used to use. Paper.
Yeah. So it just ignited a fire. And as I got into high school, I had just a dream that my grandma instilled into me. I was going to UCLA, but I wasn't a troublesome kid, and I didn't have a lot of guidance from guidance counselors. And so I did not realize that there were 2 tests that you had to take in order to be considered for UCLA. And so that dream faded very, very quickly. And I still got into a really good school, but I didn't understand things like valedictorian. I didn't understand things like GPAs. I didn't understand what all that meant. And so when I was blessed to graduate 5th in my class, and that to me didn't have a lot of weight because I didn't understand it all. So from there, it was, how do you reach kids like me so that they can get that full benefit of education?
So that's your drive, right? To
Yeah.
find kids who were underperforming for whatever reason and make them fall in love with learning.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
No, I love that. I love that that's a great drive, because I think now, how does that shift then? Because it's like there's one thing to go through public schools and pick up education, but you become a Christian. And what was the moment when suddenly you're starting to go like, oh, all this stuff I learned is what? Did you go through a process of like, how does this work? What was that like?
Yeah. So in my undergrad, I was at University of Redlands, and it's a secular school, and there's many, many great things about it. Fell in love with learning because I could go as deep as I wanted to in the subjects. But then for my master's, I went to CBU, and to have that faith and education integration was all consuming. It was so exciting just to see like, we can look at it from a worldview of why does it matter? Why do we believe it? What is truth? And so I can remember being in that first master's program and like, this is what learning should be. Another moment too was I was in corporate training, and to work with adults and to compare adult learning to child, like pedagogy, right? There's so much we can learn with how we teach adults that we should be applying to our students, our younger students as well. And so that also ignited a fire of, let's answer the why. What's in it for me? Why does it matter? We don't answer that enough in the younger grades. And so that was really inspirational to me as well.
Now, you said that you studied adult learning. So could you teach me to write a love letter that doesn't need correction? Is that...
We might be able to get you there.
All
Yeah,
right,
yeah.
all right.
Come see me.
Awesome. My biggest weakness is run-on sentences, a lot of commas. I write like Paul.
But now you have AI and you have all the support, so you have no excuses.
I mean, grammatically like Paul, right?
Paul didn't have run-on sentences. They didn't have punctuation when he was writing.
Whatever. I just know. I just know when I look at it. It looks like my writing. So,
Also didn't have gaps between words.
yeah. So what is your basic philosophy for the school when it comes to the faith aspect versus the education aspect? And I know, like, you probably get parents on both sides. No, I want the faith part to be the catapult of the school, and education secondary, and the other ones, I want education to be primary and the faith part be secondary. What is your philosophy, and how do you manage the tensions there?
Yeah, I love that. So I think that you have to kind of backstep a little bit, and you really have to think about what is education first, right? Before you consider what are the priorities for the school, what are the priorities for education, and study the Bible for some time and trying to figure out what was God's plan for education. And I felt shortchanged often because education doesn't seem prevalent in the Bible. If I had to give my take on what I studied, it's more that it's a man-made idea, right? Education, teaching, learning, that's all throughout the Bible. That is what I think is innately in us. We want to understand the world around us. We want to search for truth. But education, what is it? And so where I settled through my research is that teaching and learning, that relationship between the two, we try to capture that in education, right? And so when I think about education, and this is what my doctoral research was on, was transformational education. I firmly believe that education is in the pursuit of who we are becoming. becoming. There's a process of where I am, it's not where I'm meant to be. I'm becoming, regardless of your worldview. We are all transforming into something else. And transformation is that process of change. And so when I think about priorities for schools, regardless if I'm at a public school or at a private school, it is who is a child today and what is their potential? What are they becoming? And that is my priority for every child at our school is how can I be part of that story and who they're becoming.
And then when it comes to education, do you feel like education is very important, or along with our current contemporary philosophers, with the idea that we don't need no education?
That's a contemporary?
Quite respected
Yeah,
philosophers.
I still look at the 80s as contemporary.
Yeah.
It was 40 years ago,
I
man.
know, it's so weird.
Yeah, my thought would be that why some have that perception of education is because so often we relate education to school. And I think they're two very different things. School is the institution where we try to capture this idea of education. Education's happening whenever there's a relationship between a teacher and a learner. And so that's happening regardless of whether you're going to school or not. And so I am such an advocate of school choice because some kids don't need to be in the traditional setting. Some kids need more challenge than they can get there, or some need to be homeschooled, and so that is the beauty of American education is we get that choice. But we can't confuse school and education, right? And so schooling is the means or the way in which we reach education, but education really is how am I relating my teaching and my learning.
One thing I think that's cool about Olive Branch and being a smaller school in that sense too is we talk all the time about theology and discipleship being relational, and having those relationships. And I think our school is small enough that the kids build those relationships with the teachers that catapults them to loving to learn and just through the relationships. And I think each one of us probably could pick out one or two teachers in our lifetime that had such an important impact on our learning and our love for school. And we could probably pick a few more teachers that made us hate learning.
Yeah. I was just curious because you distinguish the difference between education and school, and that's not in some of our questions.
That's
but
okay. Yeah.
This is why it's the rabbit trail, folks.
Let's
we
do
go where
this.
we want. Because my mind swings all the way back to, like you said, the Bible, it's got lots about learning and educating, but nothing about or not education. Like
Learning and teaching, yeah.
Yeah, and so I go into I start going, I do see the church as almost an original educational center, because they were going off the model of a synagogue.
Yes.
And the synagogue was a place you were schooled regularly, and at least if you were a young male, in your Hebrew letters and all the stuff that was going on. Prior to that, in the kind of the Greco-Roman world, you look at kind of the gathering of teachers, right? So you'd have Socrates, who was considered, you've got a collection of students that are around you, but authorities would say he was corrupting, which I don't know if I agree or not agree, considering that he was a nasty person. But the people don't know that. Never mind. We won't go there. But then I think of the Jesus as rabbi with disciples, the rabbi disciple movement. That ends up becoming, with Peter Abelard and others, the universities kind of systems that are going on. But the monks are forming these little primary school concepts because they wanted teachers and others to learn everything. Like I said, so it's a kind of an I see it, and it's I see what you're saying, but how do you differentiate between education and school?
Yeah, no, I love that question. So education is that relationship, as I've mentioned, between teaching and learning, right? Teaching and learning are innately in us. We are all searching for meaning. We are all searching for a sense of understanding. We are all trying to make sense of the world around us. So that's naturally coming. And when I think of school or the institutions that really captured the essence of that relationship, I think of the academy, right? The original academy. I'm thinking Aristotle. I'm thinking, where did they spend their leisurely time, right? They spent it in discussion, kind of like this podcast format, right? Where you're just talking through ideas to try to make sense of it. And that's what I feel we fall away from too much in what we now have as schools, right? So schools were really influenced, as we know them now, by the Industrial Revolution. And we tried to systemize them as much as we can so that we can reach the masses. It became very popular. Schooling, in the sense of institutionalized schooling, were really for the elite at one point in the early schools, right? And so when we tried to make it more available and more accessible, we had to kind of defy those early leisurely pursuits. So when you've seen Jesus sitting next to the woman at the well, or you've seen him, the Sermon on the Mount, things like that, that was true learning. That is, let me make sense of the world around me, and it doesn't look the same for every person in every situation.
I mean, we're not supposed to sit in brutalist school buildings with brutalist architecture and
like the worst architecture ever.
With no creativity anywhere around. I like one of the things, if you ever get a chance, you need to go, if you live in Corona, go look at Corona Junior High's original buildings, and then go straight down the street and go look, if you get a chance, ask if you can go see the library at Jefferson.
Okay.
These were that was my mom's library. The
structures are.
It looks like a little mini Hogwarts in Corona. You're just like, oh, it's so imaginative and beautiful, and then everything else
has an owl.
And it had paintings of all the different fairy tales and different. It was such a neat place. And sit there, listen to my mom read to you Chronicles of Narnia at school, because nobody knew it was a Christian thing back then, and so it was like. It sparked imagination and learning just from the architecture. Yes. And now, I mean, I hate to say it, like, you go like Santiago High School and you're just like, this is ugly. Like, this has nothing to do with the real world. And it's that Industrial Revolution stuff, right?
Yeah, the ringing of the bells, the lines of seats, the rows of chairs and doors and all of that. I don't believe that's what was intended with education, right? But when you institutionalize something, it's hard to break it. So that is what we have. That is the model that worked at the time. But now that we learn more, especially of things like neurology, and we understand how the brain is vastly different from person to person, we're understanding that standardization isn't working.
How'd that work for you, Stephen?
Standardization. Yeah, I went to 13 schools before I graduated. Some of them were private, some of them were public, but I had to teach myself. So I just went into the library and read, and I had bad teachers and good teachers. So I've seen a lot of bad teachers, though.
So my experience, I went through the funnel. Like, I had the GATE courses from first grade all the way through, and and they didn't have IB, which I don't think is. Never mind. I have opinions. And so if you're in it, awesome. I got through it, and here's what happened for me. It was my freshman year at RCC. I locked myself in the library and read every book on memorization, study habits, all the different stuff on how to activate your mind for recall. And it was then that suddenly I was like, oh my gosh, this is so fun. Like, there's all this stuff to learn. And suddenly learning became less about like getting the grades and obeying the teachers. And it was about, oh no, exploring reality, exploring, as a Christian at that point, exploring what God had made, exploring his world around us, which I think is far more about what Christian education is about, which is different. I agree with you. Like, the why. How do you answer the why in a secular education? Literally, they're going, why am I going to use this? Well, that's the wrong answer. That is the wrong question. That's a very... You can tell we're teaching pragmatism when we're asking, well, when am I going to use this? Well, some of it's just, you should know it for the appreciation of the beauty and the wonder that it exists. Right. You're going to use math. You're going to use writing. I mean, I'm sorry, Brent, you still really do need to stop the run-on sentences, buddy.
I'm learning. Yeah.
But there was this aspect to it that suddenly was critical. And then the second thing that really broke that completely for me was my first year at Biola University under my theology professor. Now, he wasn't speaking to me directly, but he was speaking to a lot of Korean students who were in there, because the Korean students, he had quite a few of them already, or over his years known a bunch of them, and they cared more about the grade than actually understanding the material. And so they could get the answers right, but they couldn't do any abstract thinking beyond or consider what was going on. So he literally tells the class, like, I don't want you getting A's. I want you guys to learn the material. And it was just like, wait, what? because I'm the kid who was like, get the A's, get the A's, get the grades. I knew the grade point averages. I knew who was what rank at school, what it meant. And yeah, it was and because I was with all education kids. So that was our fight. That was our deal. Like, who could get the best, stuff on your graduation day.
We just had a conversation with the fifth graders. They're going into sixth grade, which for us is junior high, and they have some summer work. And there's a lot of mixed feelings because we haven't done it this way before, but there's opportunity. We have some brilliant minds in our school, and there's an opportunity to push them more. And one of the feedback that we received from a fifth grader was, but I already have straight A's. Why do I need to do extra work? And I said, that's exactly the student we want to do the extra work. That means you're not being challenged enough and you have more to give. And so we had the conversation around that, and just around, it's not for the grade, it's for the potential and for the learning. And so we had a great conversation. They're reading Pilgrim's Progress, so we're going to have a lot of fun with that over summer. But
okay, talking about that, like, excelling in school and getting good grades and challenging yourself with harder and harder classes to learn, right? My wife and I had this argument when Alyssa was a freshman in high school. She got accepted to the International Baccalaureate program.
IB. IB.
And so with me and her, part of it is like, okay, we want her to be able to get scholarships, go to university, blah, blah, blah. And so part of me was like, then why put her in these really difficult classes where if she gets a B and somebody else is getting straight A's, then it's going to hurt her chances of getting that
They're
academic
weighted
scholarship.
GPAs, Brent.
Yeah, but still, when you're getting B's instead of A's, when you can get straight A's, I kept thinking, why force her to take on so much extra work when she could breeze through and then get into the college that she wants to?
Right. Yeah, no, that's great. And, a lot of schools are now turning away from some of those harder level classes because now you have dual enrollment, you have concurrent enrollment. Why are we taking all these high stakes AP courses where it's a 50% success rate when you can just get the college credit,
Mm-hmm.
And so those are some of the ways that we need to kind of reimagine how we can do this idea of education, this relationship between teaching and learning, and just reimagine it. But then you have this funny thing called institutionalism, and the moment that you start framing things and putting them together with all the bureaucracy and all of that, it's hard to change. Mm-hmm. And so you have to be really, really smart about how you take baby steps to impact that change, because you don't want to overwhelm the system either.
Yeah, because I was just listening to somebody on the radio talking about education, and they were talking about like higher education, like even like the higher schools, and I'm just Harvard for one, so that a lot of their classes are simply pass-fail. They're not grades in a class, and so they're just like, you learn the material, you pass the class, and then, rather than weighting it.
Right. One of our teachers just got accepted into a master's program, and she's looking at two different ones, and the one that she's leaning to is the one that is more content-based. So once you learn it, you move past it. No stakes on the grades or things like that, or trying to figure out the teacher and what they're looking for. It's, do you know the content? I had the opportunity years ago, pre-COVID, we founded a school. It was open for about 8 years, and we were able to remove all of that institutionalism, if you will. And so we took away grades, and we took away, we had mixed age classrooms, and we just took away some of those things that are identifiers of school as we know it. And the hardest thing through that was reconditioning the teachers to be able to teach that way. The students were all for it. We had content standards, and they were working towards mastery of that. But the teachers took a good 6 to 8 months before they can come around to not being overly anxious about doing it a different way.
Mm. Change is hard.
It's hard. It is hard.
Especially when it's a culture that you have to change and not just a task. But one of the, if I can move forward, but one of the questions I wanted to ask you today too was, we are a Christian private school, and I know that we have a lot of families that aren't Christians that go to our school, and so just curious as to if you know why a lot of families are putting them in there, even though they're not Christians. They don't necessarily want to be swayed toward Christianity, but they want to put their kids in a Christian school. Is it because our tuition fees are cheaper than what else is out there from a private standpoint? So this is an economic choice, or is it some other reason that they want to put their kids in a Christian school?
It's a great question, and it's one that, so I have been at a couple private schools in my time in education, and one of the questions that I love to ask of families, why? Why here, why now? And there are schools where you'll have Muslims right alongside the Christians, and it's a beautiful place to be. And so in private education, you have what you call a covenantal school or a missional school, right? And so the covenantal is everybody coming in, every family member, every student, every teacher has to be faith aligned. And you have a missional school where your teachers, your staff, they have to be missionally aligned, but your faith aligned, but your students and families don't necessarily have to be. So at Olive Branch, we're a missional school. Your families coming in do not have to be Christians coming in. But of the families that I've had those discussions where maybe they're a Muslim family, why here? And it's always the values. I want to instill the values that a private school offers. Never the conversation, can I recall, of the money, never the conversation of not even the safety. Like, safety is a big reason parents choose private schools, but it's almost always, if I had to guess, I'd say somewhere around 90% of the time, the values. We want them to be raised in those Christian values.
How do you integrate those Christian values in a Christian school, and what does it look like here at Olive Branch?
Yeah, that's a great question. So all of our staff do have to be Christians. They have to commit to a Christian lifestyle, but we know how that goes, right? Every Christian's on a different walk. So what does that look like? So it's constantly reaffirming what we believe. It's constantly just checking in and where are they values-wise, where are they church attendance-wise, small group-wise, Bible studies, devotions. But we also make space for it at the school as well. So we want to pour into our teachers so that they can pour into their students. So we have twice a week our support staff, they're meeting for devotions and prayers. Our teachers are meeting every Monday morning to start the week in prayer and devotion as well. And so it's just pouring into them, making sure that questions are answered. Pastor Greg is so available to our teachers when they have questions, whether it be theological, values-based. And so it's just making sure that we are supporting them so that they then can go and model the same to their students.
Do any of the levels at the school, like in junior high, do they actually teach like theology or Bible books and stuff like that?
Yeah, great question. So this is of those families coming in that are not necessarily faith aligned. Every once in a while, you'll have a family that pushes back on the Bible instruction, and we have to. That is a core subject for us, and they will have to learn the material. They can't sit it out; it's not optional, and so sometimes that is a deterrent for families. Between private schools and public schools, we can lead with what we believe. We can lead with what we have found to be the best example of human love and human living, and so we get to lead with that. So yes, starting in preschool, they get exposure to the Bible stories. We have weekly chapels. We just adopted a new curriculum we're really excited about, where in junior high they'll be walking through the entire New Testament. They'll be studying the lives of leaders throughout the Bible. So we're just really excited about it.
One of the other tensions I would imagine that you deal with is the other side of that. Not the non-Christians putting their kids in our school, but the Christians putting their kids in a Christian school, a missional Christian school, where not everybody is faith-based and maybe has different lifestyle, expectations. Absolutely. And then they're offended that this child said this word or did this thing, and I sent my kids to a Christian school to be protected and everything. How do you deal with that?
Yeah, it does.
Do you educate the Christian parents like this is a missional school, understanding this, or how do you deal with that?
No, that's a great question. And I have been at a covenantal school, and I would say the tensions are even greater there, because you have families coming in expecting everyone to be walking a similar walk to their walk, right? And so in Christianity, because we're all on different walks, that can look very different Christian to Christian. So I think it's an more even playing field when you're a missional school, because you can come in and say, hey, some are and some aren't, but our goal is to support those in their walks wherever they are. But there are some families that will come in and they will give you that pushback of, I put them in here, I am paying this tuition because I wanted to protect them from these things. And we just have to really work through that and work through those tensions, because even as Christians, we sin and we make mistakes and we falter, and then being alongside those that are not yet convicted. You
Yeah,
know?
that's one of the. My wife worked at a private school for a few years as a math teacher, and one of the biggest difficulties she had. This private school doesn't exist anymore. Was that the administration had so much stress from the financial side that they wouldn't discipline the students. And my wife was like, they're acting like these kids are Christians, and they're not. How do we help in Christian education, especially, where I think most parents come in with this naive belief that their children are Christians, instead of actually in a covenantal or a missional school, unless they've given their life to Jesus Christ and they are following him, they're not Christians. Like this is like one of the things I'm always like,
we're trying to disciple these heathens.
Yeah, they're heathens. They are. They're little. It's a school of little heathens, especially at the younger grades. Now, does that mean that if they die, they'd go to hell? No. That's we're not talking about the theology. But what I'm talking about is they have not made a personal declaration of faith, nor do I think that when they do, that they have a full cognitive understanding of that. And that's okay. I think God takes faith at the level that they're at. But you got a bunch of kindergartners, and some of those kindergartners have really rough lives, but they're here. And you got some that are in the, that's a mix, but none of them I think we should be running around going like, oh, they're all Christians. It's like, how do you help parents with that one? Especially if they're not like coming to Olive Branch, where I will say that from the pulpit,
Right.
Hey, your kids are not the Christians you think they are. So
And these little kids, as they're growing up, again, like, they're still figuring life out. And they might be coming from a Christian family, but they're still bullying kids, So it's like, I put them here so they wouldn't be bullied, and they're being bullied. This is your fault, Dr. Araiza.
Yeah, it happens. Thankfully, so far here at Olive Branch, we haven't run into those particular tensions, but they do. They exist. There's an unreal expectation in everything, whether it be education, whether it be at the supermarket, right? We all come in with what we expect, and when what reality is doesn't meet that expectation, there's
we
a
only
tension.
go to covenantal supermarkets.
That's right. That's right. Our chicken is all blessed. But yeah, so it
Different
happens.
name for free range means something totally different.
Yeah. But what the beauty is when you invite the Holy Spirit into those conversations, and when I can bring the parents into my office and I can open in prayer and I can just ask the Lord to speak through us and in the conversations, there's heart change that happens gradually, sometimes dramatically, but usually gradually. Sometimes you have the same parents in your office over and over, but we're not just reaching students, we're reaching families, we're reaching communities, and so everything that we do, we're leading from that spirit of every person that walks through the door is someone that the Lord is placing in front of us for a reason.
And I would say, I think, the school model does a good job in that, because I know, I'm sure Greg and stuff have too, and you, Stephen, you talk to a lot of families, but I know that I've had a lot of meetings in my office with parents who really are like nominal Christians at best, or really not people of faith for the most part, but now their kids are learning the Bible. They're going home and they're asking questions, and the parents are coming in to my office going, is there some kind of a really quick, like, you just give me all the answers so when my kids are asking me? And it's like, there is no real quick, but and then they start coming to the church, they give their life to Christ, they start getting discipled up, and
we have those stories here at Olive Branch,
do all
and they're
the time,
so
every year.
amazing.
So it is amazing.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, and a lot of it is just reframing, and this is whether it be the parents, the students, the teachers, that we are all on our walks, right? And we're all learning at every moment. There's always something new to learn, and approaching it that way rather than we have all the answers and we can solve every problem. It's we're going to tackle it with you, and the biggest thing is in partnership with you. And that partnership for Olive Branch looks like family. And we cry alongside each other. We pray over each other, and it just really is a true testament to what the Lord has in community.
So that really gets to, I think, a conversation, Stephen, you and I have quite often, are on subjects that should they or should they not be taught at a private school. Because when you're partnering with parents, right, a lot of people there's a lot of debate out there about whether should a Christian school offer sex ed, or should a Christian school offer conversations about other religions. And especially when you're a missional school, how do you teach those kind of questions? I mean, Stephen,
or theological differences,
right? Do you want to lay out your thinking when it came to, because I think when we talk about sex ed, there's a tension, right? But there's the tension between we don't want to overeducate kids, or maybe we're just uncomfortable talking about it, or perhaps there's the viewpoint that like only the parents should be teaching this.
And some people, like you said, if it's a missional school, they're not going to have the parental framework that's going to make them successful in life, or at least draw them closer to the Lord. So my biggest worry is how do you do that? How do you talk about sex or identity? More importantly, even first, because a lot of the research saying it starts with you can be anything you want to be when you're a child, from Disney and all these other things. And that's a very different message than Christianity gives. And so how does that play out all the way to, okay, now I'm starting to have feelings and emotions and hormones. And a lot of teachers, because of the background of behaviorism, they just want to stop behavior, and because it's a problem to address as opposed to actually talk through the progress. And then every parent has their own opinion on what they want done. But I feel like if a kid leaves a private school and doesn't learn about like his own body, his identity, and all of that it could be a disservice to if they end up in the public school or a college, and more important. And I see that fall off from Christian schools. You put them in a college, and unless they have a good idea of who God is and what their identity is, they just go with the crowd. So
yeah, no, that is so powerful, and that is a tension that we work through on a regular basis. But I think we go back to Deuteronomy 6, right? And who is placed as the responsible party for the children, and that's our parents. And so our job is a partnership with parents, and we really instill that into our teachers. We're here to support them, but at the end of the day, they're the ultimate authority for that child in that family unit. And so we look at it in a way of so right now we're revamping our electives, right? And so we are not prescribing any one thing in that way for parents. We're partnering with parents, and here are your options. So for example, Family Week coming up, we're going to touch some really tough conversations like trauma-induced behaviors and things like that. These are optional for families. When you're ready and when you need it, it's here, right? We have Christian counseling services. We're not forcing it upon you, but we highly recommend it in many situations when we feel there can be a value. Same with sex ed. So we're in our junior high level, we want our electives to be optional, and those are some of the courses that we can offer so parents can make that decision. Is it time for them to have that conversation, and what can that look like?
One of the important things that I want to kind of bring out also is that because we're a church school, we're not just a school. Right. We have a great option in expecting parents, as we partner with them, for them at some level to be like, look, our church has training on sexual education for you as the parent to walk your children through. Have you been taking that? Are you walking through that? You need to do that, and kind of help and make it incumbent. Like I've wanted it to be like part of the orientation process that is necessary for you to go to the school. Like you have to go through a 2-hour conversation about having talks about sexuality with your family. And so you can then specialize, like, hey, I'm a single mom, I made it here, and I've only got boys. Like, who's going to talk to my sons?
It's usually a lot. And I know we talk about sexuality, we're thinking of like the, different things with identity, but I'm actually just talking about even normal child development needs to be talked about, what their body does and what happens to them. And some parents aren't necessarily equipped to do that. And so it's sometimes the church, even in youth groups, steps in and kind of gives them a guidance, because a lot of the guidance I got in public school were not the kind of, even back then, it was still like opening up things that you shouldn't really necessarily have to have a conversation with a child about.
Well, and we know that. Students gather together,
and they're going to find out on the internet.
School, somebody's going to introduce it to them before anybody else does.
But even beyond just the direct instruction on those things, at a previous school we had a course where for girls, like, what do you do when your body starts changing, and what does the bathroom etiquette look like when you go through those changes, right? And so some things do have to be explicitly taught, and there's value in that, but also those indirect moments as well. What curriculum are we putting in front of them? What books are we reading? What music are we listening to? Is it saying the same message of what we're trying to teach? And if it isn't, then we have a problem. And that's the beauty of being at a private school, is we can help with those guardrails to help support those parent views and the school's teachings.
So, in a totally different direction than you kind of brought up, like, we got to be careful about what kind of books are we reading, these kinds of things. Get the same flow of thought, like, what do you teach, what do you not teach? One of the things that I've always had a problem with is my dad being an educator, I'd get on him about this, and I'd say, Dad, you have a hyper-biased curriculum. And he's like, no, it's not biased at all. I'm like, absolutely it's biased. Let me explain this quickly to you. As a pastor who knows what indoctrination looks like, let me tell you, this is indoctrination. It's like, no, it's not. I said, then why am I reading the Scarlet Letter? Did you know Nathaniel Hawthorne hated the Puritans? He made up that whole book with the intent to to scarlet letter the very Puritans, and he
Yeah.
did a great job. And then why is the only time that we read a sermon from the Great Awakening that galvanized the United States together as a people? It's
Jonathan
sinners in the hands of an angry God.
It's
And
other
only-
sinners from
and only the section that talks about judgment and stops exactly before you proceed into the grace of God. Like they only give them the why is it then you turn around and you read Moby Dick, who is a son, he hated the church. And
The
through
white
all
whale is a
kinds of-
symbol of God and
Yeah.
fighting against God.
When you approach curriculum at how do you, as from a Christian perspective, engage this material because it's going to you need to have it because welcome to the institutionalized liberal world. But B, there are other writings and things that are just as powerful and good. And how do you get that introduced and have those conversations appropriately without inappropriately, literally, kind of educating them away from the faith?
Right. Yeah, I know that's a great question. And so we shelter when developmentally appropriate, but we do need to expose them to the ways of the world, right? And they do need to be able to build up that resiliency and that grit and that perseverance to be able to just function within the world. And so strategically, we introduce certain things at certain times, right? And it's I go back to this idea when my boys, I have 4 kids, so I have 3 boys and I have a girl. And my boys, no guns in the house, no Nerf guns, no, anything like that. And I remember my cousin coming to me once and he's like, if you shelter them from the exposure to these things, when they actually get their hands on it, how are they going to react, right? And so now we have Nerf gun wars and things like that as a family.
Absolutely, yeah. That's what we wound up doing. So.
Yeah, but you can't shelter them from it, but you do have to use wisdom and discernment on when are they ready. And that's where you need to understand developmental appropriateness, right?
Yeah, I didn't hand a BB gun to my
Exactly.
younger ones until I knew that they had obeyed all the rules.
Yes.
And then and what's fascinating is once they learned the rules, they were on each other over
Yes.
it. And so,
And the other thing too, like water guns, those water soakers, those are nice and educational because then you can teach them when people melt, they're a witch, And so that you got to learn.
That's
You gotta
good.
learn.
Yeah, we might need to spread those around school.
they're
And
from the short story. No.
Along those lines, some of the concerns just from when I was in the school watching kids, watching boys particularly, they kind of struggle because like 75 to 80% of the school is all girls, teachers, and there's a difference in like rough and tumble play and their interactions. And a lot of boys have become stifled in their ability to express themselves. How do you compensate for that in a Christian school that is still predominantly female student teachers and teachers, but how do you compensate for that and still have them develop the bravery, the strength, the ideas that kind of come out naturally in a boy? You give him a stick, it's a gun, it's a weapon,
Right.
but it's not necessarily a bad thing. It's a protection. It could be. So I've just noticed that a lot of times when even growing up, it's like just sit still forever, and then the overdiagnosis of ADHD right now because of that. How do we deal with that at Olive Branch?
yeah, so we have work to do in that regard, right? Because we are within. So we have institutionalized schools, but then we have private schools and we have public schools. And I'm going to go on a rabbit trail for a second. But when,
Don't forget us
You're
homeschoolers. We just hand our
And the
children
homeschoolers,
guns.
yes.
Go kill things. I'm just kidding. We don't do that.
But when you, as a private school, so we have separation of church and state,
Yeah.
there's tax funds that are available to public schools and give them resources and PDs and exposure to all the latest and greatest ideas. But as a private school, you have to earn and raise every dollar that comes through your door. We do not have the same resources. And so our change is a lot slower because we don't get to go to the cutting edge tech
Yeah.
conferences and things, And so, the rabbit trail that I'm going on there is we have a ways to go because there's practices that have just been around traditionally that we have to start breaking. We have to start looking at that. But I think it's really important that, especially with terms like bullying or terms that we have overused and really don't understand what they mean, and we want to just label it on there to get our way with what the agenda is that we're trying to achieve. He's bullying him, so therefore he should be out of the school, right? And so a couple of things. One is that you have to, and I think it comes with good literature, good stories, the Bible, where we are looking at the role of boys. How did God create boys, and what is their role? It is to protect. It is to lead the household. It is for those reasons, right? And so when we can look into literature, there's a book called Why Gender Matters, and it is a brilliant book that is written about just your autonomy and how it is different boys to girls structurally, the rods in your eyes and how girls' eyes have less of one rod than boys' eyes, and they have a preference for certain colors over other colors. Yeah. And so when you look at it from the design of the Lord and how he so intricately made it and purposefully made it, it's easier to have those conversations, right? And so when you're looking at those stories and you are identifying with somebody in a story, whether it be in the Bible or whether it be a good written literature book, then you start understanding how to use it and how to use it appropriately. And so I think we need to get away from some of those conversations of bullying or roughhousing or boys will be boys or things along those lines. We're trying to put a frame around making excuses for certain behaviors, right? But what we need to have more conversations about is virtue. What is virtue and why does that matter? And so you're going to have a vice on either end, but we're striving for that golden mean, and we're striving for just the right amount of the right character, and that's how we combat that.
And I think I would imagine too, a lot of it, and from the education standpoint and reshaping culture standpoint in a Christian school is recapturing language.
Yes.
Because the culture now has
weaponized it.
Weaponized language, like even bullying, right?
Yeah.
And I mean, this is kind of ridiculous, and I didn't get my grandson's permission to share the story, but I'm going to share it anyway.
Go ahead.
It's always better to ask for forgiveness than permission.
Yes.
But the whole bullying thing, and I get it. Bullying is an issue, and we shouldn't belittle the idea of bullying. But I remember Tucker was really good friends with this girl all through school here, all through school, kindergarten to, and then at one point he came home and he was upset with her and wasn't going to be her friend and not talk to her anymore. And I'm like, why? And he's like, because she was bullying me today. And I'm like, you're kidding. You guys have been friends forever. What did she do? And he goes, I tripped and she laughed. And I'm like, Tucker, that is not bullying, That is not bullying. I mean, it's funny when people trip and fall. Did you get hurt? No. Okay, then.
I mean, your wife laughed at you when you fell in the middle of a target.
Right, and the kids are growing up with this idea that something that simple would be bullying. If somebody just jokingly made fun of you that is bullying, and it's like, that's life,
Yeah, and one word that I would love us to revisit and re-understand is the word happiness, right? And so there's such a push in secular world that is towards happiness. Do what makes you happy, right? But when you think of virtues and when you think of your purpose and who God has designed you to be, you're looking more for that eudaimonic happiness, that what is your purpose and where do you find the joy that comes with doing that for which you were made to do, And so those are the conversations we get to have in a private school that allows those conversations to be easier.
The years ago when my boys were young, like this is just how our culture is, right? So, and my two boys were wrestling and we're just wrestling out there on the lawn on Sunday morning, right? So we're just like
a normal Sunday then, right?
Pastor, yeah, typical pastor.
And man, they were just being little, they were like 5 and 4, just wrestling around with each other like little boys
having
do.
Fun.
And man, some lady came up and she's like, "How dare you let your kids do?" And she just was off. And my wife's just like, "Are you kidding me? These are like," she's just a strong person. She's like, they're boys, and you just cut it out." And this one was just like, "Rah, rah, rah." But that was like, I grew up like where you literally took threw things at each other, and it's called nation ball. We'll call that nation ball. I like that. It's like you're a nation and you're a nation. All this kind of stuff. But we've turned this. We've gotten so soft and padded in so many ways that boys don't know how to handle it, to the point that Brent, you're like, not that we shouldn't really say bad things about bullying, which sounds like you've been bullied by people who talk about bullying. I mean, listen to the language we use. We're so afraid to just go like, bullying's not what we think it is. Right. There is bullying.
There is.
Define it appropriately.
Right.
Otherwise, it's a stick that people use to bully. Right. Bullies go like, I use the bully stick and whack, 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 whack.
And perhaps it goes without saying, but we should clarify, we don't have boys wrestling all over Olive Branch. We are very...
on Sundays, though.
Yeah, on Sundays maybe. But at school...
I actually think we should have a class for it.
The
best thing that we ever did was put our sons in martial arts at some level, because it teaches them how to control themselves, and it teaches them how to defend themselves appropriately.
Exactly.
They become better at confrontation. They become more confident. They learn the virtue of it. And therefore, that's also why we need to return to debate courses.
Yes.
You need to have students disagree with each other very meanly in an appropriate fashion so they can learn that's not the appropriate discourse. You're losing points.
Right.
You just lost your lid. That's losing points. We're so afraid of the confrontive virtues that used to exist that Jesus does all the time and that are found throughout the Bible, that I do think that there's what's been called the coddling of not just boys, but not just the mind. Yeah. Because the mind, when you coddle the body, you coddle the mind. Yeah. When you coddle until you can't feel physical injury because I threw a ball at you, which isn't really going to hurt you. It may sting a little bit, and then we're going to coddle the mind when internally it feels like we've been stung a little bit. At which point, virtue is impossible to form, because what forms character? According to Romans chapter 5, it's suffering that produces endurance. The endurance produces the character produces hope. Yes. Now you're like, oh my gosh, you want kids to suffer?
Yes.
Come on, calm down. They suffer plenty. Have you been to school? Right. I mean, school's suffering at some level. You have to memorize things. It's hard. But guess what? When you do it, you grow. You have to fight through things that emotionally sting. And yes, life it has a suffering. Now, I'm not talking about like torturing children. Come on. No. But obviously, we're talking about a Christian education. We have to think radically differently than so much of our culture. What were you going to say, Stephen?
Well, in order to grow, you have to have those growing pains, and they are painful when you grow just naturally, but the same thing is true with children when they're trying to be stretched. But also, I just wanted to throw in there just a question that's similar, because we did talk about bullying and growing. How do you manage as a school the stuff that used to just happen on a campus and now can be left off the campus with social media, and you have to reinforce, like, okay, we talked about bullying, but if you don't have to bully at school, I can bully at home. I can text everybody, or now even Roblox can be used as a way to bully. And how does the school teach virtue is really what I'm trying to say, because we have the same problem with the word bully even there, because someone said a mean thing to you, all of a sudden that's cyberbullying. So we have to be careful of the language. But how do you teach virtue in a world that's not your world anymore? It's off campus. It's at home.
Yeah, this is so real in our world right now. In fact, we just dealt with something very similar with our junior hires not too long ago. And so there's a line. There's only so much a school can do, right? And where do we get involved in this particular situation? It was rough. It was tough. They had a chat group outside of school, and a lot of times it's a conversation with the parents. There's only so much that we can do, and we're going to bring it to your attention, and this is what we found out about it. This is how we got involved into it. But more of it's parent education. You need to monitor them when they're on their devices. You need to not let it just be a leisurely, long-term, passive process, right? And so that's how we chose to handle it. We brought the parents in with their permission. We also did end up bringing the students in. And the conversation was around, what do we expect? But more than what do we expect, what does the Lord expect? Did this honor him? And one of the phrases that you'll hear us say a lot is, are you honoring the Lord? Are you glorifying the Lord in that decision? And so we get to have those conversations. And it turned into a lot of tears. And when there's this value in knowing storylines and knowing where people are coming from. And so when the boys got to share in how it affected them, and they were in my office and got to speak through how it affected them, it was powerful. And we have seen some changes in those boys and their relationship with each other, because they were able just to talk through it and talk through it in a way of, this is how it affected me, and this is how it didn't honor the Lord.
And the boys that were being bullied or being talked about, those are the ones that brought it to your attention?
Yeah.
Or the parents brought it to your attention?
Actually, the students did. So another student who was in that same chat group that was observing it and was not okay with the way that it was happening was who came to us. And so they brought it to our attention. We looped the parents in, because it was on parent time. We did get permission from parents to bring the boys in, and it was powerful. And I think that's really the distinguishable between private school and public school, is what you lead with. We can lead with the word, you know, and that's so powerful on the result that you get because of that.
And I think it's important too, because it's a difficult thing, because a lot of kids, it's like, how does that make you feel? I don't know. Right. And so
use your
to
words.
get them to draw out and share too. I mean, that's an art in itself.
It is. Yeah.
Commend you on that.
I think what's nice about the Christian school environment is the ability to create community. What is unique about creating community here? Opportunities like, in some schools you can't touch a teacher, you can't even talk to them, you don't get to see them at church. What is the benefit of actually going to a Christian school in the sense of building a community?
Yeah, so not just Christian schools in general, but Olive Branch. What has really set it apart for me, and comparing it just to other schools that I've been at, is a church-school relationship. The way that we build community both inside and outside of the school on Sundays together,
On softball fields.
On softball fields, yes. That is the power. That is the power of Olive Branch specifically. These kids spend time outside of school together on Sundays. They're excited to come to church to see each other. And so I think that that's the value in just being able to be relational. As I mentioned, the tears, the praying over, we go through marriages, through births, through deaths, together, and we just do life together. And above education, above teaching and learning is we were meant to be in community, and we weren't meant to do it alone. And so being able to come together, and this is why we've emphasized some new programs. For example, our homeschool programs. This year we've had the honor of bringing in homeschoolers so they can be part of that community, because homeschooling is so valuable. And for a season, we homeschooled our kids as well, and I think there's so much value in that. But then to be able to have a community to balance both of those worlds is amazing. And the homeschool world is growing, so it's nice to be able to bring them into the community with us. But then also giving options for students to really pursue their passions. And so those after-school enrichments, the cooking classes, the competitive soccer teams, all of those things, give them that freedom within boundaries to live out what we're teaching them.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah.
One of the questions I would have too is, the COVID lockdown for almost 2 years in public school is what, 4 or 5 years old now?
5 years old now.
Four. 4 years old, maybe 3 years old too, by the time they really came back to school, maybe 4.
Have they ever come back to school?
Yeah.
In some ways, yeah.
But I just know that during that COVID time, we were open, pretty early, and the schools were closed for another year and a half. So it really helped enrollment at our school because they wanted but the kids that are still, that were in the public schools for 2 years, locked down, and now some of them are at our school now. Do you feel like they've gotten past that and have moved forward? Do you feel like it is still a hurdle that they're trying to overcome?
Yeah, that's a great question. So those, let's say kinders, those preschoolers and kinders that were learning to read, write, and talk during the COVID time are now getting ready to go into junior high, right? And the effects of that are lingering, and they haven't disappeared. And for example, in our 5th grade class, the extreme of needs and of abilities are so broad that next year we're really just kind of reimagining how do we better capture the potential of every student, but also fill some of those gaps. And we have so many kids that will come in 3rd grade year, 4th grade year, right? And they have just not been in the environment that works for them. And so we, as a private school with so little resources, are trying to be strategic and creative. And how do we fill those gaps? How do we combat the fact that so many students had covered faces while they were trying to learn how to articulate words,
Or just attachment, identity. There's a lot of inability to read facial features cognitively that have been declined. Right. So you have to have people look you in the eye.
This is the beauty of being in a private school,
Yes.
though. Like the institutional reality of a large juggernaut like a public school.
Right.
They think they can address those things. But the reality is, I've been in school long enough to know there's 2 problems. Number one is that you always end up educating to the lowest common denominator in the classroom. You don't educate to the top because you're going to leave the others behind, and then you're being evil for that. The other problem is that you're educating a child that you need the parent buy-in from.
Right.
You're never going to defeat what's happening at the home, no matter how long you have the kid in your class. And so in a private school setting, you have the opportunity to actually reimagine that, where it's like, well, you may be here, but you can go to this class. Because it's not about the system.
Right,
and
right.
It's getting teachers, it's getting parents to think away from the box and to start thinking about solving problems.
Right.
But now the other side is, financially speaking, like there are some things we can't handle. Like if there is a severe mental challenge, cognitive impairment, right? That we would love to be able to cover that, but that's not in the zone yet, right?
Yeah. Yeah, I know. And so how we combat that, we have what we call our personalized pathways. And so on those personalized pathways, we develop individualized academic plans. And you've probably heard of IEPs and 504s and things along those lines. And so this is our version of, say, an IEP. What is our current level of performance? what is their potential, where do we want them to go, and what are their specific goals. But what's the beauty about our IEPs is it's not just for those who are struggling. We have a 4th grader who won our math Olympics at the national level in math computation. He's working at a 12th grade level. What about that child, right? And
he needs a specialized learning path.
He does, yeah. So he's being pulled out for math, and he's working at an algebra level. Yeah. So we are not just reaching those that need, and we are one of the few private schools that are blessed with both math resource teacher and a reading intervention teacher. And so to be able to offer those as options, we have pullouts, we have enrichment classes, we have Christian counseling, we have speech therapy. We're just trying to figure out, who are you? Where are you at? How can we help come beside what the Lord's doing in your life and be part of that story, right?
And so we can't say that we can do all of it yet.
Correct. Not yet.
The vision is like my youngest son, he is not the kid who's going to like excel in all of the academic side of things, but you place him in a room and you give him something to build. You give him if he had been trained in wood, metal, any of those kinds of trade skills, he would have excelled faster than any person that was around him any kid who was like my other sons, who would have beat him in an academic race any day of the week. But how do we handle the trade skills, which are not the same as academic skills? Right. I know a lot of people want to say they are. They are absolutely not the same. How do we, seeing an individualized plan, is that an idea in the future? What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, so it's already becoming a reality. So we have students that have different interests, passions, giftings, right? And so if you don't follow our Instagram. But you'll see things like drone coding. You'll see things like robotics. You'll see things where we're going hands-on, and let's figure out how we build it. We are doing PDs with our teachers to get closer to project-based learning, to go more standards-based. So we're getting away from your traditional grading systems. And this is in the spirit of, we want them to love learning, and we can't love learning if it's all about knowledge acquisition, right? We need them to be able to build, to think, to problem solve, to find real world problems and ask themselves, how can I respond to this? One of the end projects that they did in junior high was a Shark Tank type thing, where they looked at, what is a real world problem? What is my solution, and what is my prototype to build it, right? And so when you walk into our junior high classrooms, or really into any of our classrooms, you're going to see projects all over the walls and all over the shelves, because there's so much value in not just knowing what it is. I can tell you all the planets in order from the sun, but when I build that solar system, there's so much more power in that. And I go back to that book by C.S. Lewis, is Abolition of Men, the Green Book. The green literature book that he talks about, I think it's in that one. But this idea of, we can give you all that book knowledge, but when I look at that waterfall in the book and it's not inspiring, yeah, it's a waterfall and it's okay. And how are you going to describe it? But when I experience that waterfall, I can't deny that there's a creator, right? And so those are the types of awe-inspiring moments we're trying to create.
The last thought was just this years ago, and I've had this conversation a couple times with different of our heads of school, and we were dealing with a massive amount of mental illness, exacerbated by situations that are beyond us. But one of the critical things that I've discovered in walking with people through recovery, walking with people through all the kinds of places, one of the it seems like we've got reading, writing, arithmetic, we got all that down, trades down. How about self-learning? How about self-knowledge? So many people I know don't even know what emotion they're feeling. They can't distinguish between angry, sad, disappointed, happy, pensive. Like, there's this whole realm of emotional language that what was interesting, what got me on this was that I was listening to a neuroscientist just the other week, and he was talking about we've probed the brain like crazy over and over and over, and there's only 4 things we can get the brain to do when we probe it. Number 1, we can make it have perceptions, right? So that's learning your ABCs, your 1, 2, 3s, you're having perception of reality, understanding what you're looking at. The second one is have a memory. So that's memorization, having things in your head. The third thing that they can make is movement. Well, there's PE and getting physical movements down. And the last one is emotions. And yet in the world of education and the mind, it seems that this is the one that we say should rule everything, and yet we do nothing to educate on how to understand it, have self-control, even what it means. And there's so much that's left on the table. I was just curious, have you guys thought or talked through those concepts at all, and what would they look like?
Yeah,
or
I
is
love
that a
that.
future concept to think
No, we've already started planting those seeds in our teachers. And so we approach it from that transformational education lens, right? And I don't know if you've noticed in the world, there's these triads, like there's this power of three and things happen in threes, right? And so
I love triangles.
Yes. And so,
Don't get me started.
and so I think that is so true when we look at holistic education, right? And this is encompassed in that idea of transformational education, is that you cannot just think about the cognitive part of a person. And I get a lot of pressure from some scholars, but I like old school thinking. So this idea of Benjamin Bloom of the three, so not the four, but the three is the mind, the body, and then the soul or the spirit, right? And so when you approach children with those three things in mind, how does one affect the other? You can't separate them. That is who the child is. That is the whole child. And so first, it's starting with educating our teachers. So we have to be mindful of the whole child. And what does that mean? And what does that look like in your teaching? And so those conversations are already being had. And then it's transferring it. Once we have an understanding of what that means and how we can lead with that, then we can better lead our students to be able to do the same for themselves. So those are the conversations we're having, are from those three realms of mind, body, and spirit.
Awesome. Well, now we could go all over
All
the
day.
place. There's so many more directions we could take it, but really we are at our ending point. And I just want to say thank you for coming. Thanks
Thank
for
you.
diving in on this. One final thing, like, okay, and say people are listening and they're like, hey, I know somebody who's thinking about education. I'll give you your final pitch. Why Olive Branch?
Yep.
And if they're saying like, I can't afford that, what would you say?
I love that. Why Olive Branch? Because it's different and it's family. And we're not just reaching the minds of students, we're reaching the body and the spirit of students. And we're giving them the opportunity to figure out who they are. And I really think that's, regardless of where you are, homeschooling, private school, public school, we're searching for identity. And if we're trying to find our identity in anything but Christ, none of it makes sense. And so we're helping make sense of the world around us by forming that identity and that sense of belonging in Christ. So that's the why Olive Branch. I can't afford it. None of us can. We're in California. It's expensive. I always joke for our new families coming in for tours, private school is a lifestyle. What I can say, though, is at Olive Branch, we've taken a very firm commitment that we never want financials to be the reason someone doesn't come here. So there's ways, there's donors, there's financial assistance, there's all of the ways to make it happen. And so come look at it, come walk through it, pray through it. If the Lord is bringing you here, he will make a way.
Awesome. Well, thank you guys for joining us, and thank you,
Thank
Dr.
you.
Araiza.
Thank you for having me.
We're excited that you were here with us. And for those of you who are new to us, we'd love to hear from you. You can, we're hoping we brought all kinds of questions to your mind. We're hoping that you've got all kinds of ideas that you would like to just follow through on. Let us know. You can use the email rabbittrail@obcc.church. That's rabbittrail@obcc.church. You can drop something on one of our shorts or something like that. We'll try to respond to it. But otherwise, we're just glad that you joined with us, and we hope that you guys have a great let's hope you guys have a great rest of your week, and join us next time here at the Rabbit Trail. God bless you guys.
Bye.